The Five Love Languages. The Five Love Languages with Dr. Gary Chapman, well known for his marriage counseling and marriage enrichment. Topics that are covered in this series: what happens to love after the wedding, keeping the love tank full, falling in love, love language number 1, words of affirmation, 2, quality time, 3, receiving gifts, 4, acts of service, 5, physical touch, discovering your primary love language, love is a choice, love makes a difference, children, and love languages. Today our topic is discovering your primary love language. Again, with Dr. Gary Chapman. We begin. Discovering the primary love language of your spouse is essential if you are to keep his or her emotional love tank full. But first, let's make sure you know your own love language. Having heard the 5 emotional love languages, what are they? Words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. Some individuals will know instantaneously their own primary love language and that of their spouse. For others, it will not be that easy. Some are like Bob from Parma Heights, Ohio, who after hearing the 5 emotional love languages said to me, "I don't know. It seems that 2 of those are just about equal for me." "Which 2?" I asked. "Physical touch and words of affirmation," Bob responded. "By physical touch, what do you mean?" "Well, mainly sex," Bob replied. I probed a little further, asking, "Do you enjoy your wife running her hands through your hair, or giving you a back rub, or holding hands, or kissing and hugging you at times when you're not having sexual intercourse?" "Those things are fine," said Bob. "I'm not going to turn them down, but the main thing is sexual intercourse." That's when I know that she really loves me. Leaving the subject of physical touch for a moment, I turned to affirming words and asked, "When you say that words of affirmation are also important, what kind of statements do you find most helpful?" "Almost anything if it is positive," Bob replied. "When she tells me how good I look, how smart I am, what a hard worker I am, when she expresses appreciation for the things I do around the house, when she makes positive comments about my taking time with the children, when she tells me she loves me, all of those things really mean a lot to me." Did you receive those kind of comments from your parents when you were growing up? "Not very often," Bob said. "Most of what I got from my parents were critical or demanding words. I guess that's why I appreciated Carol so much in the first place, because she gave me words of affirmation." Let me ask you this. If Carol were meeting your sexual needs, that is, if you were having quality sexual intercourse as often as you desire, but she was giving you negative words, making critical remarks, sometimes putting you down in front of others, do you think you would feel loved by her? "I don't think so," he replied. "I think I would feel betrayed and deeply hurt. I think I would be depressed." "Bob," I said, "I think we have just discovered that your primary love language is words of affirmation. Sexual intercourse is extremely important to you and to your sense of intimacy with Carol, but her words of affirmation are more important to you emotionally." If she were, in fact, verbally critical of you all the time and put you down in front of other people, the time may come when you would no longer desire to have sexual intercourse with her because she would be a source of deep pain to you. Bob had made the mistake common to many men, assuming that physical touch is their primary love language because they desire sexual intercourse so intensely. For the male, sexual desire is physically based. That is, the desire for sexual intercourse is stimulated by the buildup of sperm cells and seminal fluid in the seminal vessels. When the seminal vessels are full, there is a physical push for release. Thus, the male's desire for sexual intercourse has a physical root. For the female, sexual desire is rooted in her emotions, not her physiology. There is nothing physically that builds up and pushes her to have intercourse. Her desire is emotionally based. If she feels loved and admired and appreciated by her husband, then she has a desire to be physically intimate with him. But without emotional closeness, she may have little physical desire. Because the male is physically pushed to have sexual release on a somewhat regular basis, he may automatically assume that that is his primary love language. But if he does not enjoy physical touch at other times and in non-sexual ways, it may not be his love language at all. Sexual desire is quite different from his emotional need to feel loved. That doesn't mean that sexual intercourse is unimportant to him. It is extremely important, but sexual intercourse alone will not meet his need to feel loved. His wife must speak his primary emotional love language as well. When in fact his wife speaks his primary love language, and his emotional love tank is full, and he speaks her primary love language, and her emotional love tank is full, the sexual aspect of their relationship will take care of itself. Most sexual problems in marriage have little to do with physical technique, but everything to do with meeting emotional needs. After further conversation and reflection, Bob said, "You know, I think you're right. Words of affirmation is definitely my primary love language. When she has been cutting and critical of me verbally, I tend to withdraw from her sexually and fantasize about other women. But when she tells me how much she appreciates me and admires me, my natural sexual desires are turned toward her." Bob had made a significant discovery in our brief conversation. What is your primary love language? What makes you feel most loved by your spouse? What do you desire above all else? If the answer to those questions does not leap to your mind immediately, perhaps it will help to look at the negative use of love languages. What does your spouse do or say or fail to do or say that hurts you deeply? If, for example, your deepest pain is the critical, judgmental words of your spouse, then perhaps your love language is words of affirmation. If your primary love language is used negatively by your spouse, that is, if he does the opposite, it will hurt you more deeply than it would hurt someone else, because not only is he neglecting to speak your primary love language, he is actually using that language as a knife to your heart. I remember Mary in Kitchener, Ontario, who said Dr. Chapman What hurts me most is that Ron never lifts a hand to help me around the house. He watches television while I do all the work. I don't understand how he could do that if he really loved me. Mary's deepest hurt, mainly that Ron did not help her do things around the house, was the clue to her primary love language, acts of service. If it grieves you deeply that your spouse seldom gives you a gift for any occasion, then perhaps your primary love language is receiving gifts. If your deepest hurt is that your spouse seldom gives you quality time, then that is your primary love language. Another approach to discovering your primary love language is to look back over your marriage and ask, what have I most often requested of my spouse? Whatever you have most requested is probably in keeping with your primary love language. Those requests have probably been interpreted by your spouse as nagging. They have been, in fact, your efforts to secure emotional love from your spouse. Elizabeth, who lived in Maryville, Indiana, used that approach in discovering her primary love language. She said to me at the conclusion of a seminar session, whenever I look back over the last 10 years of my marriage and ask myself, what have I most requested of Peter? My love language becomes obvious. I have requested quality time most often. Over and over again, I have asked if he would come and go on a picnic, if he could go on a picnic, take a weekend together away, cut the TV off for just an hour and talk with each other, take a walk together, and on and on. I felt neglected and unloved because seldom did he ever respond to my request. He gave me nice gifts for my birthday and special occasions, and wondered why I was not excited about them. During your seminar, she continued, the lights came on for both of us. During the break, my husband apologized for being so dense through the years and so resistant to my request. He has promised me that things will be different in the future, and I believe they will. Another way to discover your primary love language is to examine what you do or say to express love to your spouse. Chances are what you are doing for her is what you wish she would do for you. If you are constantly doing acts of service for your spouse, perhaps, although not always, that is your love language. If words of affirmation speak love to you, chances are you will use them in speaking love to your spouse. Thus, you may discover your own love language by asking, how do I consciously express my love to my spouse? But remember, that approach is only a possible clue to your love language. It is not an absolute indicator. For example, the husband who learned from his father to express love to his wife by giving her nice gifts expresses his love to his wife by doing what his father did. Yet, receiving gifts is not his primary love language. He is simply doing what he was trained to do by his father. I have suggested 3 ways to discover your own primary love language. 1. What does your spouse do or fail to do that hurts you most deeply? The opposite of what hurts you most is probably your love language. 2. What have you most often requested of your spouse The thing you have most often requested is likely the thing that would make you feel most loved. And 3, in what ways do you regularly express love to your spouse? Your method of expressing love may be an indication that that would also make you feel loved. Using those 3 approaches will probably enable you to determine your primary love language. If 2 languages seem to be equal for you, that is, both speak loudly to you, then perhaps you are bilingual. If so, you make it easier on your spouse. Now he or she has 2 choices, either of which will strongly communicate love to you. 2 kinds of people may have difficulty discovering their primary love language. The first is the individual whose emotional love tank has been full for a long time. Her spouse has expressed love in many ways, and she is not certain which of those ways makes her feel most love. She simply knows that she is loved. The second is the individual whose love tank has been empty for so long that he doesn't remember what makes him feel loved. In either case, if you can go back to the experience of falling in love and ask yourself, what did I like about my spouse in those days? What did he do or say that made me desire to be with him? If you can conjure up those memories, it will give you some idea of your primary love language. Another approach would be to ask yourself, what would be an ideal spouse to me? If I could have the perfect maid, what would she be like? Your picture of a perfect mate should give you some idea of your primary love language. Having said all of that, let me suggest that you spend some time writing down what you think is your primary love language. Then list the other 4 in order of importance. Also, write down what you think is the primary love language of your spouse. You may also list the other 4 in order of importance, if you wish. Sit down with your spouse and discuss what you guessed to be his or her primary love language. Then tell each other what you consider to be your own primary love language. Once you have shared that information, I suggest that you play the following game 3 times a week for 3 weeks. The game is called Tank Check, and it's played like this. When you come home, one of you says to the other, on a scale of 0 to 10, how is your love tank tonight? 0 means empty, and 10 means I'm full of love and can't handle any more. You give a reading on your emotional love tank. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0, indicating how full it is. Your spouse says, what could I do to help fill it? Then you make a suggestion, something you would like your spouse to do or say that evening. To the best of his ability, he will respond to your request. Then you repeat the process in the reverse order so that both of you have the opportunity to do a reading on your love tank and to make a suggestion toward filling it. If you play the game for 3 weeks, you will be hooked on it. And it can be a playful way of stimulating love expressions in your marriage. One husband said to me, I don't like that love tank game. I played it with my wife. I came home and said to her, on a scale of 0 to 10, how's your love tank tonight? She said, About 7. I asked, what could I do to help fill it? She said, the greatest thing you could do for me tonight is to do the laundry. I said, love and laundry? I don't get it. I said, that's the problem. Perhaps you don't understand your wife's love language. What's your primary love language? Without hesitation, he said, physical touch, and especially the sexual part of the marriage. Listen to me carefully, I said. The love you feel when your wife expresses love by physical touch is the same love your wife feels when you do the laundry. Oh, bring on the laundry, he shouted. I'll wash the clothes every night if it makes her feel that good. Incidentally, if you have still not discovered your primary love language, keep records on the tank check game. When your spouse says, what could I do to help fill your tank? Your suggestions will likely cluster around your primary love language. You may request things from all 5 love languages, but you will have more requests centering on your primary love language. Perhaps some of you are saying in your minds what Raymond and Helen said to me in Zion, Illinois. Dr. Chapman, all that sounds fine and wonderful, but what if the love language of your spouse is something that just doesn't come naturally for you? I'll discuss my answer in chapter 10. The 5 love languages, and our next topic, love is a choice. Love is a choice. And remember, we must express love in his or her primary love language. That's the key to setting off the fireworks. Expressing our love in the love language of our spouse. Again, a very special thank you to the author of The 5 Love Languages, Dr. Gary Chapman.